Today in the video, you'll hear the story of how Leonardo da Vinci enters a brutal game, uncovering secrets hidden in the Sistine Chapel. He's invited to Rome to decipher Michelangelo's mysteries, but what he finds exceeds all expectations. It turns out there are secrets hidden on the chapel's walls that could destroy the very foundation of the church's power. And as he gets closer to the truth, dark forces are ready to push him aside to ensure these secrets remain buried forever. The story is told from the point of view of Leonardo da Vinci.
It was a cool evening in Milan when the letter arrived, sealed with a wax emblem I'd only ever seen on the most secretive of documents. The scent of ink and parchment lingered as I broke the seal, unfolding the heavy vellum. I read it twice, just to make sure I wasn't mistaken. "Leonardo, you are summoned to Rome." At first, I thought it was another commission from a powerful noble or church official, perhaps a new war machine or architectural proposal for the Duke of Milan, Ludovico Sforza, who had always been keen on advancing his military and architectural ambitions. But no, this letter was different. It came from the Vatican itself. The words were cryptic, but unmistakably urgent. "We seek your expertise, Leonardo. We are engaged in a project that requires the skills of a man who understands art, science, and the mysteries that lie between. The Pope has requested your presence at the Sistine Chapel. Come at once." The Pope himself. I felt a tightening in my chest. The Sistine Chapel, that immense revered space, a testament to art and power, was already under the hands of Michelangelo Buonarroti. What could I, a humble artist and polymath, have to offer in such a place? Yet curiosity, that unrelenting force within me, stirred a fire. There had to be more to this mission than what was written. I packed my things in haste. It had been years since I'd last set foot in Rome, and the very thought of Michelangelo's masterpiece being a part of this intrigue was enough to make my pulse quicken. The world knew of Michelangelo's prowess as a sculptor, but it was his fresco work on the Sistine Chapel that had captured the imagination of all. The grandeur, the divine themes painted across the vast ceiling, the battle with his canvas, all spoke of genius, and of a man who never shied away from controversy. Arriving in Rome under cover of night, I was ushered through the city's narrow streets and into the Vatican. My senses hummed with the weight of history and secrecy. Every corner I passed seemed to whisper stories of power, intrigue, and art. I was led to a hidden chamber within the Vatican, where the shadows cast by candlelight danced against the walls. A figure emerged from the darkness. It was a man I had not expected to see. Pope Julius II, a towering figure of authority and ambition, had summoned me personally. "Leonardo da Vinci," he said in a voice that brooked no argument, "you stand before me not as an artist, but as something more. Your understanding of the human form, of nature, and of the very essence of our world is needed." I bowed, trying to hide my shock. The Pope continued, "Michelangelo, as you know, has been working on the Sistine Chapel for some time, but there are mysteries in his work. There are codes, secrets buried within his frescoes. We need your eyes, your mind, to uncover what he has hidden. The world may never know, but history will remember those who uncover the truth." I couldn't believe my ears. Michelangelo, a man I revered for his genius, was hiding secrets? What could he possibly know that was worth keeping hidden, especially in a public place like the Sistine Chapel? This wasn't just about art. This was about something far deeper, something that could shift the very foundation of understanding. The Pope's eyes bore into mine as if he could read my thoughts. "You will find the clues the Pope whispered, "but you must tread carefully, Leonardo. The truth is not always meant to be found." And so, with that cryptic invitation, I stepped into the labyrinth of secrets that would unfold under the flickering shadows of Michelangelo's brushstrokes. The Sistine Chapel would become my battleground, and the truth hidden within the artwork would become my obsession. The following morning, the grandeur of the Sistine Chapel loomed before me. Its walls were lined with the most splendid frescoes, each telling a part of the grand narrative of Christianity. But it was the ceiling, Michelangelo's masterpiece, that I could not stop thinking about. It stretched high above, the frescoes so vast they seemed to swallow up the very light that filtered in through the chapel's windows. As I stood in the center of the room, my eyes traced the curves of the painted figures, the creation of Adam, the fall, the prophets, the Sibyls. Each brushstroke seemed to hold a universe of thought and insight into the divine. But beyond that, I sensed something else, something hidden, like a secret waiting to be unearthed. The air was thick with the smell of fresco pigment and the dampness of stone. I had seen many works of art in my life, but this was different. Michelangelo's genius was undeniable, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this chapel than met the eye. The Pope had hinted at it, secrets buried in plain sight. I needed to find them. I spent the first few days in the chapel, observing every detail, every figure, with the utmost precision. I climbed scaffolding, examining the ceiling up close. I had my own method of investigation, always the scientist, the anatomist. As I worked my way through the scenes, my mind raced. The human form was my field, my obsession. The musculature, the posture, the hands, everything was perfectly rendered. But it wasn't the bodies that bothered me. It was the way they were arranged. There was an order, a symmetry in the chaos of the figures that I had never seen before in any of Michelangelo's works. Then I noticed it. In the creation of Adam, where the hands of God and Adam are about to touch, there was something odd about the space between them. It wasn't just the divine gesture. There was an inexplicable energy in the way the fingers hovered, as though they were connected by some invisible force, a code of sorts, a pattern. I returned to the floor, running my hand over the cool stone tiles. My mind raced with theories. Was this some kind of celestial alignment? Or perhaps a mathematical equation hidden in the composition? It was as if Michelangelo had written a hidden language, something only a few would ever notice. After days of study, I had discovered a peculiar arrangement of the figures, an arrangement that didn't fit the traditional biblical narrative. For instance, in the Last Judgment scene, the figure of Christ was not in the center as one would expect. He was offset to the left, a subtle deviation. Why? And why did some of the apostles seem to be positioned in patterns that didn't match the conventional flow of the divine story? I began to suspect that Michelangelo was not merely telling a story of Christian salvation, but was encoding something far older, something rooted in knowledge that had been suppressed for centuries. Perhaps he had embedded hidden codes, knowledge of the ancients, philosophy, science, even forgotten histories of the world that dared not be mentioned. One evening, as I pored over my notes, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man I had seen once or twice around the Vatican, a scholar, I was told. His name was Agostino, and he had a peculiar air about him. His sharp eyes seemed to notice everything, and his presence unnerved me. "You've been here for days, Leonardo," he said in a soft voice, "and I can see the questions you're asking. You're not just studying the artwork, are you?" I stared at him, not knowing how to respond. "You're looking for something," Agostino continued, stepping closer. "Something that was hidden, something that Michelangelo himself may not even be aware of." He paused, his gaze shifting to the ceiling as though he could see what I had seen. "The codes in the Sistine Chapel are not just artistic choices, Leonardo. They are keys, and those keys unlock knowledge that some would prefer to remain locked away." I felt a chill run through me. "What do you mean? What knowledge?" Agostino's smile was thin, enigmatic. "The question is not what Michelangelo knew. The question is what the Vatican and others fear you might discover." His words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. "You must be careful, Leonardo. Some truths are not meant to be uncovered. But I can tell you this, you are on the right path." As Agostino turned and disappeared back into the shadows, I was left alone with my thoughts. What had I stumbled upon? A secret so powerful that even the Vatican seemed to fear it? This was no longer just about art. It was about something far larger, something that could alter history itself. And I was determined to uncover it. The next morning, I returned to my investigation with renewed determination. Agostino's cryptic words echoed in my mind as I stood once again in the midst of the Sistine Chapel. The space seemed more charged now, like a living entity. The figures above me weren't just frozen in time, they were speaking, if only I could decipher their language. As I studied the frescoes, my thoughts kept returning to the strange alignment of the figures, the hands, the eyes, the position of Christ. Everything had an intentionality to it. I had seen Michelangelo's technique from afar, but up close I could feel the subtle movements of his genius. But now, something felt different. It was as though there was a hidden hand guiding me, pulling my focus to specific details I had missed before. I started with the creation of Adam again. The positioning of the figures was perfect, the tension between the two hands almost palpable. But there was more to it. The way Adam's body was contorted, perfectly relaxed yet poised, was not merely a display of artistic mastery. There was something deeper. A strange geometry emerged when I traced the lines between the figures, the edges of the painted clouds, and the curves of the hands. The space between God and Adam was, in fact, the exact shape of a human brain. The lines of divine energy, the subtle red hues of the painting, all seemed to be leading me to this one conclusion. Michelangelo had embedded a clue, a message within the body itself, a hidden reference to the mind, the consciousness, the very core of human existence. Could this be a hidden allegory? Was Michelangelo making a statement about the divine intellect, the power of human reason? I moved on, taking a step back to study the ceiling in its entirety. The more I observed, the more I became certain. There was a deliberate pattern woven through the entire chapel. From the creation to the fall of man, the positioning of the figures and their surrounding elements created a network of interlocking geometries, some of which I had never noticed before. I turned my attention to the figures of the prophets and sibyls. They were not simply iconic representations of ancient figures. They were positioned in such a way that they formed a pattern that could be interpreted as a celestial map. The planets, the stars, the constellations, all seemed to be present, subtly concealed within the artwork. But why? What was Michelangelo trying to tell the viewer? And then there was the scene of the deluge. The flood, with its chaotic destruction, was one of the most violent scenes in the fresco cycle, yet it seemed to contain hidden symbols. Symbols I couldn't decipher at first, but something about the way the water seemed to flow in unnatural directions made me pause. I realized that the water patterns, when examined under a specific light, formed a pattern similar to the Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio. Was this some sort of coded message hidden in plain sight? A mathematical formula of life and creation that even the church would want to keep from the public eye? By now, I had drawn the attention of the other scholars working on the chapel. They were curious, of course, about my study, and some of them even offered their help. But I trusted no one, not yet. I could feel that I was venturing into a domain where knowledge could be as dangerous as it was valuable. It was then that Agostino returned to see me. "You're seeing it now, aren't you?" His voice was a whisper filled with knowing. I nodded, though I hadn't yet grasped the full scope of what I had uncovered. "I'll tell you something," Agostino continued, glancing over his shoulder to ensure we weren't being overheard. Michelangelo was not the only one to leave hidden codes in his work. There are others, men who understood that knowledge is power. They planted seeds for those who were brave enough to find them. The Vatican was built on secrets, and this chapel is no exception. "What kind of secrets?" I asked, my voice hushed. "The kind that could change the course of history," he said, his eyes gleaming. "But I warn you, Leonardo, this path you're walking is dangerous. The higher the truth, the more fiercely it is guarded." I was becoming more convinced that this was no longer a simple investigation into artistic mastery. It was a quest for knowledge, one that Michelangelo, the Pope, and perhaps others had long sought to keep hidden. But why? Why were they all so determined to guard these secrets? What did they know that could be so important? As Agostino spoke, I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about the Sistine Chapel, about art, and about history itself. There was a reason why Michelangelo had been so secretive. His genius, his perfectionism, had masked a deeper purpose, a hidden code that was now beginning to take shape before my eyes. The chapel was more than just a place of worship. It was a treasure trove of hidden knowledge, waiting for the right mind to unlock it. I was that mind, and I would not stop until the secrets of the Sistine Chapel were laid bare. But there was no turning back now. The further I ventured into this labyrinth, the more perilous the journey became. I could only hope I was prepared for what lay ahead. The days bled into nights as I tirelessly continued my investigation into the Sistine Chapel. I no longer saw a mere collection of biblical scenes on the ceiling above me. What I saw now were whispers, cryptic messages embedded in the layers of paint, their meanings as elusive as the brushstrokes that hid them. As I pieced together the patterns, a profound realization struck me. Michelangelo had not only created a masterful work of art, he had written a message for those who could read it. It wasn't just a religious statement, as many believed, but a map that pointed to something far older, something that lay buried beneath the very foundations of the Vatican. This wasn't just art. This was an intellectual rebellion, a silent challenge to the authority of the Church itself. The Fibonacci sequence, the geometric patterns, the celestial alignments, each one seemed to lead me toward a singular conclusion. Michelangelo had hidden the secrets of the ancients in his frescoes. Knowledge lost to time, to religion, to history. And as Agostino had said, it could change the course of history itself. But what was this knowledge? It was a question that had been gnawing at my mind for days. What could be so powerful that Michelangelo had to conceal it in the very frescoes that would immortalize him? And why had the Vatican, the very institution that commissioned the work, allowed such dangerous ideas to flourish in their sacred space? I felt I was on the cusp of something monumental. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized I was not alone in this quest. Someone was watching. Someone was aware of my investigation, and they would stop at nothing to keep the truth buried. That evening, as I studied the intricate patterns of the Last Judgment scene, I heard footsteps approaching from behind. I turned to see a figure step out from the shadows. It was Agostino, his face pale, his expression grave. "Leonardo, you need to stop," he whispered urgently. "You've gone too far. They know. They've been watching you." "Who knows?" I demanded. "What is this all about? What are they hiding?" "The truth," he replied. "The Vatican is built on it. The papacy is not just about faith, it's about power. Michelangelo wasn't just painting for the church, he was painting against it, and so were others before him. They knew that knowledge, true knowledge, had the potential to dismantle the very foundation of what the Vatican stood for." I felt the weight of his words sink into me like a heavy stone. For the first time, I realized the full extent of what I had uncovered. This was no longer just a puzzle to be solved for the sake of art. It was a conspiracy that had been centuries in the making. "I thought I was just studying art," I said, my voice trembling. "But it's something far more dangerous, isn't it?" Agostino nodded. "You've uncovered something that could change everything. If the wrong people find out, they'll stop at nothing to keep it hidden. You need to leave, Leonardo. Leave now before it's too late." But it was too late. As he spoke, I saw movement from the corner of my eye. Figures emerged from the shadows, men I had not seen before, their faces hidden in the darkness. And one of them held something in his hand, a symbol, a key that matched the hidden codes I had uncovered in the frescoes. "We've been waiting for you, Leonardo," a cold voice said from the darkness. "You've found what you shouldn't have." The men stepped forward, surrounding me, their eyes cold with intent. I knew what was happening. They were here to silence me. The truth was too dangerous to allow someone like me, an outsider, to expose it. The knowledge I had uncovered threatened the very core of the church's power. I glanced at Agostino, but he was already gone, swallowed by the shadows, leaving me to face this final test alone. But I was not afraid. I had seen enough, understood enough to know that the pursuit of truth, no matter the cost, was worth it. In my heart, I felt a burning certainty. History would remember the hidden knowledge of the Sistine Chapel. It would find its way into the world, even if I didn't live to see it. And perhaps, just perhaps, this was how it had always been meant to be. The last thing I saw before the darkness consumed me was the fresco of Christ in the Last Judgment. His gaze met mine, filled not with divine judgment, but with the knowing of a secret that had transcended time. Michelangelo had left a trail, and I had followed it to the end. Now, the world would eventually find its own way to that truth. As I closed my eyes, I felt the weight of the ages on my shoulders. The Sistine Chapel had told its story, and in the end, it was not just Michelangelo's masterpiece. It was the silent repository of a secret that would never be truly forgotten. And in the shadows, the story was just beginning.